Welcome to The Blue Dot, Northern Kentucky's premier political podcast, brought to you by the Kenton County Democratic Executive Committee. Welcome back to the Blue Dot podcast, where today we will explore the intersection of policy, community, and how we move forward in a very polarized world. I'm Natalie McDonald.
And I'm Brian Kale. Today's episode is a tough one, but it's essential. We'll be talking about the systematic erasure of diversity, inclusion, and Black history under the Trump administration and how it's affecting communities right here in Kentucky.
Yeah, Brian, but before we dive into that topic, we unfortunately find ourselves recording this podcast in the wake of yet another week of violence. Last week, we saw the assassination of Charlie Kirk, a conservative political activist and the founder of Turning Point USA, who was murdered while speaking at an event at Utah Valley University in Orem, Utah. There was widespread condemnation of the shooting from leaders of all political persuasions, including Governor Beshear, the Kentucky Democratic Party, and of course, we here at the Blue Dot Podcast unequivocally denounce violence of any kind.
Yeah, Natalie, this is a senseless and tragic act of violence. And on the same day, there was also yet another school shooting at Evergreen High School just outside of Denver, Colorado. A 16-year-old opened fire, injuring 2 students, and then turned the weapon on himself. The shooter eventually died from the self-inflicted gunshot wound. 2 other shooting victims remain hospitalized, one in critical condition and one in serious condition. I checked this morning, and that person has just been upgraded. However, this school shooting received little media attention as it was overshadowed by Kirk's murder.
Yeah, exactly. And it seems like we see this with all political acts of violence, that there's this kind of massive knee-jerk reaction to point blame. And, President Trump himself made an Oval Office address later in the evening after the shooting, of course, immediately blaming radical leftists and Democrats. And this was done without a shred of evidence, who the shooter was. And at the same time, he completely ignored that Colorado school shooting, which is really sad.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I can't really recall too many of the school shootings, of which there have been way too many, he has even reacted to, at least publicly. But Charlie Kirk, his organization, Turning Point USA, that you mentioned before, is a powerhouse in promoting conservative values, especially among young Americans. It has established over 800 chapters on American college campuses and works to recruit young people and educate them in what TPUSA sees as traditional conservative values. Kirk himself was famous for touring college campuses and conducting open debates with volunteers. He invited his adversaries to prove me wrong. That was his tour. And these events were very popular, and YouTube is loaded with videos of Charlie taking on all comers.
Yeah, exactly. And you can admire his willingness to have open debates with those who disagreed with him. But many found his comments to be misogynistic and anti-gay and anti-trans and racist. And we don't really know at this point if these provocative viewpoints were what motivated his assassin. We just don't know. And as of our recording on Monday, September 15th, the motive of that Evergreen school shooter is still unknown. But either way, I think it's important that we talk about and identify the underlying reasons why these violent actors were influenced, because the fact is they were radicalized, There's a reason why they're doing this.
Yes. And there are some indications at this early stage that Charlie Kirk's shooter was possibly immersed in like an underground gaming culture, mostly due to some cryptic inscriptions that were found on some of the spent and unspent bullet casings, some kind of, gaming language that I guess I don't understand. I haven't been able to figure out what exactly they mean. And perhaps this influenced this young person to commit this act. Maybe it was simply Kirk's controversial beliefs, but whatever drove this person to commit a heinous act of violence, it needs to be uncovered and it needs to be publicized. We need to know about it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree 100%. And, this whole underground gaming culture I'm learning about. I have no idea. It's not part of my bubble whatsoever. But it seems like there's a lot there that we need to look at. And even with this Colorado shooter, it sounds like he was radicalized by neo-Nazi white supremacist viewpoints and even posted some of that online before the attack. So either way, like you said, we need to know, because there's this dangerous undercurrent that I think we're seeing, especially with young men in this country, and we need to recognize it And I think we need to have real conversations on why this is happening and how we can heal, because we surely aren't doing anyone any favors by jumping into conclusions and blindly pointing fingers. The fact of the matter is we need real leaders to step up. From our
Mhm.
influencers to podcasters to politicians to those of the pulpit, we need leadership because we've seen in the wake of these tragedies and others, we are not going to get that from our president.
Yeah. Traditionally, our president assumes the role of healer in chief when tragedies such as these befall our country, but instead, our current president blames the radical left for all of the acts of political violence that we have seen. He never misses an opportunity to divide us.
Or doesn't.
Yeah. Trump said he wants all Americans to, quote, commit themselves to, among other American values, those of free speech and the rule of law. And we're taking those quotes from the 4 minute or so talk he had the evening of Charlie Kirk's assassination. So free speech and the rule of law. Okay, sir, I'll certainly do that if you will.
Right.
I know this is
Exactly.
no laughing. Yeah, I know this is no laughing matter, but come on. It is difficult to stay silent while our convicted felon president, who has over 400 lawsuits pending against his administration for unconstitutional and/or unlawful actions, preaches to the rest of us about following the rule of law. And the only free speech Trump allows is from those who agree with him.
Absolutely. And this is exactly why we're not going to get unification from him, and
Right.
it's not going to come from him. I think we have to challenge ourselves to wake up every single day and ask, are we going to be part of the problem? Or are we going to be part of the solution? I think we need to be
Absolutely.
mindful of who we're getting our information from. Is it from those that want to unite us or those that want to divide us? And really just kind of, come to the understanding and realization that there's this entire internet machine specifically designed to keep us apart. And that's never really been more apparent. And as I just said, there's this whole underground culture that I don't know about, and that made me realize that we live in completely segmented realities from one another, separated by these algorithms and echo chambers. And specifically related to this event, there's this whole segment of the population that has only seen Charlie Kirk as a religious inspirational leader, and there's this other one that saw his racist, misogynistic, homophobic rhetoric. And then the largest, I think, portion of our population is those that have never even heard of him.
Right. Yeah.
So it kind of explains to me why we'll see online, we see these people posting their love for a person they'd probably disagree with if they saw him through my lens and vice
Mhm.
versa. So I think we just really need to speak to each other, listen to each other, and not with the goal of changing minds, but to gain an understanding of each other's realities, because Brian, they are shockingly different places.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And to your point, Natalie, a recent article in The Atlantic is entitled Republicans Don't Understand Democrats and Democrats Don't Understand Republicans. It discusses a new study that shows how little each side truly understands the other. And I think we both keep hoping that the most recent tragedy will be the one that sets us on the course towards dialogue and reconciliation. Maybe we're finally ready?
Yeah, I sure hope so. But I think all of this speaks to a broader discourse that we see with the topic that we were set to discuss on this week's podcast. And that's the division that has been brewing over diversity, being all of these different thoughts and different backgrounds. But since returning to office, President Trump has issued a series of executive orders aligned to the controversial Project 2025 agenda. And we know that we've
Uh,
talked about that before on this podcast.
my least favorite project.
Right? Exactly. My goodness. We all knew it was coming.
Mm,
But these orders have led to the removal of Black historical figures from federal websites. It's led to the defunding of cultural institutions and the dismantling of DI programs nationwide. And we'll be joined by Jerome Bowles, the president of the NKY chapter of the NAACP. And Mr. Bowles is also the CEO of the Bowles Center for Diversity Outreach.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to our conversation with him and to gain his insight because it seems like every day there is something outrageous, whether it be attacks on the Smithsonian, removing references to historical Black figures, the systematic termination of minority government staff, and even, God help us, the threat of re-erecting Confederate statues. This administration just won't stop.
And we could go on and on with examples. All of this stuff has been removed or altered under the guise of this anti-woke sentiment. But I also just want to say the caveat that this isn't just limited to them removing references to Black history. They also have removed history about women and pretty much anything referring to the LGBT community. We're renaming bodies of water and on and on and on. But for the sake of our time and our sanity, we'll focus today just on the right.
Thank you.
We'll focus on the assault against the Black history and the Black community.
Well, just let me say here, I may be woke, but I am damn sure awake.
Right.
So regressive. And
Right.
like you said, Natalie, there are just so many examples. For starters, the National Park Service scrubbed references to Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad on the national park's web pages. This is just so quintessential to our national history that it is inexplicable. But then rewriting history is one of the fundamental actions of the authoritarian playbook. It's right here in front of us, everyone.
100%. And those are on public facing websites, right? Like the
Yeah.
National Park Service and the Smithsonian websites. But then we get into a little deeper with the Department of Defense websites. They did things like remove references to Jackie Robinson, right? Who served in the Army, and they've removed information about Major General Charles C. Rogers, a Black veteran of the Vietnam War and Medal of Honor recipient. They've deleted training videos about the Tuskegee Airmen from new recruit courses by the Air Force, which to me is,
Ugh.
I remember growing up and learning about them and just thinking that was so cool and such an interesting part of our history. And they're even renaming U.S. naval ships Thurgood Marshalls and Medgar Evers. So it's it's beyond just websites and museums.
Yeah, both the Thurgood Marshall and Medgar Evers vessels are part of the John Lewis class fleet, replenishment oilers, named in 2016 by then Secretary Ray Mabus to reflect the values of equality and inclusion. The class was named after the civil rights leader and Congressman John Lewis. And those aren't the only vessels being targeted. Others include the United States naval ships Harvey Milk, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Harriet Tubman, Dolores Huerta, and Cesar Chavez.
And I like how you kind of pointed out that they were done to reflect the values of equality and inclusion, and which is just, should be something that is just not controversial, and it's so important. I mean, diversity builds strong communities, you know? So it's just really just inexplicable.
In our opinion, at least.
Well, it is, right? And while some of these things were instated, there's just no reason or justification why they were removed in the first place, other than just being cruel and creating division. And then on a national level, we're seeing all of this, but that's starting to trickle down here in Kentucky, where we had House Bill 4, which basically is just taking cues from all of the federal issues and bringing it here at a state level, where they banned DEI offices and training in public universities. It prohibits race-conscious scholarships and even restricts curriculum that includes, quote, discriminatory concepts. And who gets to decide what that is?
Let me guess. The white guys?
Right?
House Bill 4 is legislation copied from special interest groups outside of Kentucky, and it uses words like indoctrination over and over to basically ban certain curriculums. For instance, it bans courses that indoctrinate students with race-related concepts. That language is vague, but it's already having a chilling effect on educators who teach Black history.
Yeah, and I don't think it's just about textbooks. This goes to things about identity and who gets to
Yeah.
be remembered and who gets erased.
Yeah.
It's an attempt to show that nothing historical can come from ordinary people. And that is what makes this country so great, is that great things happen from ordinary people. At the end of the
Right.
day, it's a direct attack on Black history and academic freedom. And supporters can claim it's about neutrality, but when neutrality erases stories of resistance and courage and systemic injustice, then what are we left with?
Yeah, that neutrality sounds vaguely like that free speech thing we talked about earlier. It is what those in power deem it to be. And now with HB 4, we're seeing a rollback of previous progress. Scholarships for Black students are being restructured. Cultural centers are losing funding, and students are being told that their lived experiences are divisive.
Yeah, exactly. So it just goes beyond policy. I mean, it really gets personal. It's how young people see themselves and how communities preserve their stories and how we move forward as a state. Really?
Yeah, that's right. And the attempt to erase any diversity is a key concept of Trump's agenda. Hello, fascism. In January 2025, President Trump issued executive orders 14151 and 14152, effectively dismantling DEI initiatives from federal agencies. These orders terminated DEI offices, canceled equity action plans, and even paused federal funding for programs deemed to promote woke ideology.
And Brian, what is this? What is woke anyway?
I'd rather be woke than asleep.
Right? Nobody can, if you ask somebody, they're not able to define it. It's just like some term used by lazy people because they can't define what they're really is bothering them.
Yeah, well, DEI programs have historically aimed to level the playing field, whether in hiring, education, or community development. In Northern Kentucky, these programs have supported underserved communities, provided scholarships, and fostered inclusive dialogue. But now, with federal and state level rollbacks, many of these initiatives are at risk. So, what happens next?
That is surely yet to be determined. And let's bring our guest in to give us some insight on that. Today, we're honored to speak with a leader who's been at the forefront of civil rights advocacy in Northern Kentucky for over 15 years, Mr. Jerome Bowles, CEO at the Bowles Center for Diversity Outreach and president of the Northern Kentucky chapter of the NAACP. From organizing community conversations to pushing for systemic reform, Mr. Bowles has been a steady voice for justice, equity, and unity. Mr. Bowles, thank you so much for joining
Glad to
us.
be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, Jerome, it was great meeting you. So, to start off, why don't you just tell us a little bit about you, about yourself and your positions, both as the president of the Northern Kentucky NAACP and CEO of the Bowles Center for Diversity Outreach.
Okay, very good. Thanks very much. So I'm from Madisonville, Kentucky, originally in West Kentucky, and migrated to Northern Kentucky through Northern Kentucky University. Graduated from there and then attended the University of Louisville while I graduated. And I tend to stay around Northern Kentucky after that, so you want to use my talent and education that I acquired from both of those higher education institutions to benefit the community as much as possible. And so we got together with a team here in Northern Kentucky and reactivated the NAACP, which had been dormant for about 20 years. And I think we reactivated that in the late 2000s. And
Wow.
so they had been inactive. So when you don't have an active voice in your community for that amount of time, then you have to reintroduce yourself to the community and regain the trust of the people in the community who understand specifically what the NAACP historically contributes to. So then from there, I formed the Bowles Center for Diversity Outreach, which is an education consulting firm which crosses over into healthcare and community building capacities. What we try to do there is work with particularly educators there to empower them to better relate and serve underrepresented populations that attend their school districts. In addition to that, we work with law enforcement. We do some law enforcement trainings on community policing and other activities to help law enforcement get ahead of any kind of issues that might develop in the communities. Then on healthcare, we always try to address health equity and make sure that healthcare people have access to healthcare no matter what
Right.
their backgrounds.
Wow, that's a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah, exactly. It sounds like you've been involved in so many things, especially over the years. You've been leading for over 15 years. So, what are some of the most transformative things that you've been able, or you've been at least seen in our community throughout
Well,
your
I think
tenure?
you have to have a commitment to the betterment of the community, and whatever that looks like, it looks different in each community group's eyes. And the betterment of the community, from my perspective,
Hmm.
may be a holistic approach to making sure everybody has access to equal opportunity, access to education, equal opportunity education, are included in the decision-making processes in counties and city governments, getting in front of issues that are happening in our community that surprise us, when major issues come up that we didn't plan for in our strategic plans, but also just being a voice, a consistent voice, because in these challenging times, I just say the one benefit for us in the NAACP and the Bowles Center is we have lasted for quite some time by being at the table. If we introduce an initiative in education, an inclusive initiative, we want to be at the table for the long run, not as the introduction to that opportunity, but it's going to take some time to implement and make sure that process comes to fruition. And so we try to make sure that we do that because that builds trust. And that builds a long relationship with those entities that we try to partner with. But it takes a team approach and it takes an open mind and open heart. And then one other thing I just say is we have to understand the language that our community and our region uses to market itself. If our region is using our language to market itself, such as we want to be a competitive region and separate ourselves from any other region so we can attract the best businesses, have high quality healthcare, better education for everybody, then we have to move in that direction as well. And then use our language there to assist those who make that kind of policy to make it better.
Yeah, you said a couple things that I took notes on there that were really interesting. One of them was the time to implement, these changes in policies or these initiatives. It must be, with that in mind, it must be pretty heartbreaking to see some of these being now dismantled because you know how long it takes to build, and now you're going to have to recover from a dismantling and not only undo the damage, but now start over again. I mean, how does that? What are your thoughts and feelings about some of
I
that you're
think we have
seeing?
to readjust, refocus, and reapply ourselves, and then come up with some bold ideas to address those issues now. Because we are in the civil rights community, we knew that these challenges were coming, but the goal is how to lead our community out of those issues that we've had for quite some time. When something is dismantled that we depended on for quite some time, you got to have some leadership there to kind of gradually understand the fact that that's coming down the pipeline, and you may have to adjust what you're doing to prepare your community for a different time and a different day. If not, you can potentially be stuck in that era, or you miss out on an opportunity. So that's unfortunate that these things are being dismantled. But in this day and age, we have to prepare ourselves for what the challenges are that are coming, and it's painful. But again, with the collective will and the
Yeah.
collective talent that represents the communities, I think those communities have a unique opportunity to create a plan to force their interests ahead.
Yeah. I I I I guess that's it's somewhat cyclical, unfortunately, I guess. It's probably not the first time you've kinda had some of those setbacks and had to make those readjustments and, recommit yourself.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So we have to recommit ourselves, and particularly when you have the dismantle of diversity, equity, and inclusion in higher education, and then in the corporate and business communities. So we have to readjust ourselves to that. And also, I always give an example here is that during the civil rights movement, when our attorneys in the NAACP, Thurgood Marshall, Charles Hampton, Houston, were trying to fight for integration, they looked at the Constitution and the laws that were on the books, and they used those laws in their favor, just like the other side would use the laws in their favor to prevent those opportunities from happening. And so sometimes you have to be creative in that, and do a deep dive into the language there, and craft your policy, craft your agenda based on the current laws or the language within the law, because you can find your way forward within the law of exclusion. And I think that we need to kind of really do a deep dive into
Yeah.
that right there.
Mm.
Yeah, and speaking of kind of some of these laws in Kentucky, we had this House Bill 4 that was fast tracked. Ultimately, it was vetoed by the governor, but it passed, and it dismantles, all abilities to have DEI in universities and in teaching curriculums and things like that. And again, the kind of going to what Brian was saying is it's retracting all of the work that's been done. And is there anything on a grassroots level to work with legislators to try to get things like this not in our legislation with these bills like House Bill 4, which are really detrimental to basic diversity practices?
Well, that's good. Our state conference in the NAACP and our relationship with other state stakeholders who are aligned in this effort to maintain our position with DEI, and talk about the advantages that that's had for our state and our nation. We are continuing to fight, and we haven't given up any kind of momentum in terms of the setbacks. So we still align ourselves with people of goodwill who want to help address those kind of issues there and come up with plans. We always try to engage our legislators and to make them aware that this diversity, equity, and inclusion doesn't take away from any group. It only enhances it. And it's a great way forward to maintain our talent base and increase our talent base in our region. It's a great benefit for our business community. It's a great business model. In addition to that, it's empowering to broaden that perspective of young people in education. But on the flip side of that is when you dismantle something, that's an opportunity for groups who have felt the dismantling to reposition and reorganize themselves. If DEI is eliminated on college campuses, then we got to bring that to the community. That means the community has to rise up and connect with institutions or other community groups of how we're going to create programs in our community to make up for those losses there. So it's a great opportunity now to reinvest, revisit, and then come out as champions. Because I always say it's right here, some of these opportunities were not necessarily, these are policy oriented goals to dismantle these initiatives, but also hidden within that is to encourage students not to attend those institutions. But I always tell the students now, this is a better time now than ever for you to refocus on your education.
Wow. Okay. So your optimism is really making me feel better. I'm really glad we're having
Exactly.
you on. I needed you. You also mentioned earlier on the community policing, which I'm very interested in, especially in light of, what has been happening or almost happened over the last couple of weeks in Chicago with the Trump administration threatening to bring in the military, that performative act that they're going to do there. And I listened to the mayor of Chicago and the chief of police and the governor, J.B. Pritzker, and, they're saying you took billions of dollars from our budget for us to enhance our policing, improve community policing, to do other things that will help us reduce the crime rate. So you've taken that money away and now you're going to bring in the military like that's going to solve a problem that actually is being created because of the lack of funding.
One perspective I have about law enforcement and then the current administration wanting to go in and potentially bring the National Guard in is that city governments have to go in and admit sometimes that they have some challenges. Okay. Now these challenges exist within within certain segments of the community that need more resources directed toward them. Okay. I'm not necessarily talking about more police. I'm talking about more
Right.
outreach efforts, more social workers, more community groups connected to resources, boots on the ground with folks that you can form relationships with to help deter some of the potential activity. Also, you want to make sure that you already have a relationship with state police, in those communities like that. You
Oh,
want
yeah.
to make sure you have that. You do everything in your power to make sure you're doing everything in your administration to meet those challenges there before somebody says that, well, based on the data shows you have an uptick in crime, therefore we got to send these individuals in. But you do everything you can to address that. Yeah, there's some major challenges in those communities. Law enforcement can handle it by themselves. They can handle it, but they need other resources. They need financial resources. Because some of these cities, for example, Louisville, Kentucky, I think it's down 300 police officers. So they have not gotten to the
Wow.
same level of police officers that they've had in the past. But the challenge is, and I ask my law enforcement partners this question, is when did you recognize the shift? The shift, I mean, when did you recognize the shift that happened when some individuals no longer wanted to be law enforcement personnel? There was a shift that happened. And when did y'all recognize the shift? And they said, well, admittedly, they said, well, during the George Floyd situation. So it's about what kind of shifts that happen in our society at different times and how we're going to adjust to the shifts. But also it's the message within the shifts that we're sending. When you got a shift there, you got a challenge there that you have to meet. And sometimes we can miss an opportunity. One thing I liked about a previous police chief in Dallas, Texas, when they had a challenge there in the past few years back, he was marching in the street with people that were protesting. So law enforcement joined the march effort there. And then once he was able to speak to the entire community, he said to the community, "We're hiring." Okay. And I thought that was a great segue, a great opportunity to relationships,
Yeah.
even based on the difficulties that were happening in that community. He reached out to that community and said, "We need you all." And so in our communities with law enforcement, we have to have a reciprocal or a relationship there that we need each other, but that needing of each other has to be a genuine, lasting partnership. And you may have to do some things different. That means you might have to police different. Okay, you might have to be seen different. Because I think what we're doing right now is we're going toe to toe. We're matching energy with energy. So, say for example, if you have a challenging issue in the community, law enforcement is matching that certain energy rather than learning how to de-escalate that. And so we need more
Mm-hmm.
de-escalation. We
Yep.
need more community policing. We need more outreach efforts. And then too, we need more efforts in the schools to be able to talk with our students in the schools about when they leave in the summer or when they leave after school, what to engage themselves in. So we need more
Mhm.
recreational. We need more employment opportunities. We need opportunities for them to grow, to direct their energy toward. And sometimes I think the education system is moving so rapidly, they don't have time for those things anymore.
Yeah, that's a definitely really good points, and having that kind of open perspective and looking at what do we need in those communities, right? Like there are problems, and I think it's we have to address them, and how can we come together and kind of speaking on this unity and coming together, especially with of diverse backgrounds. We did have, and Brian and I talked about this earlier in our podcast, the shooting death of Charlie
Right.
Kirk. He's a divisive personality, but of course, all of us are in very much agreement that, of course, there's no place for violence at all. But I think it speaks to this larger divide. And I think that a lot of people are in these different kind of echo chambers, right? A lot of people haven't heard kind of the divisive things that he had said, and they're only hearing about things that he was maybe a religious person. So there's this divide in the message, and there's a divide in, I think, how we perceive information. And I don't know if you have any comments on that.
First of all, I want to say condolence to his family, because you already mentioned we don't want those kind of actions to happen nowhere to any
Absolutely.
person, at a school or anywhere in the community or anything like that. We're the United States of America, okay, and we have to refocus on that to remind ourselves we're the greatest country in the world and we're the United States of America. And therefore, that's the umbrella for everything. Now, we're the United States. So how are we going to look at ourselves as this United States of America rather than creating silos and breaking apart? I just want to maintain the United States of America where we can continue to be or challenge ourselves to be the greatest country in the world, even though we have major challenges right now. So these issues that come up nationally and the voices that are addressing some of these issues in their mind, they're doing the right thing in their mind. They are saying the things in their communities that they feel that their communities need. But the challenge is, are those things the way forward? Are those things the way forward where everybody can seize an opportunity and see ourselves in the future that we all can succeed and come together? Now, our voices should be voices of inspiration. Our voices be the
Yeah.
voices of inspiration. And I think when people attach themselves on to some kind of group in social media, you have to challenge yourself to say, is this a voice of inspiration? Is this the voice of a lasting generation? Is this the voice that's going to maintain our competitive edge in our world? Is this the voice that my kids are going to be subjected to in the future? Am I paving the best way forward for them? And I think it's just the response that we have. We have to be very mindful of how we even respond to those kind of challenges that we have. A good leader would stand up and say that yes, we have challenges, but we're still trying to chart a better way forward for everybody. Recognize the wrong that was done, but still create a high energy, bold vision for our community, right there for our nation. And that's when we need healing. Okay, we greatly need healing. And before that healing to happen, we're gonna need that bold leadership right there, that bold leadership of inspiration coming together and then charting the best way forward. It could be done.
Yeah, the president of the United States used to be the healer in chief, and unfortunately, that's not the message that we've received thus far from our current president. And it would be nice to have that level of leadership, and hopefully, it comes through from someone somewhere soon. I think we all hope for that. Could you possibly share some of the current initiatives bringing back to Northern Kentucky that the Northern Kentucky NAACP is working on, like some of your top action items you have on your list right now?
Yeah, I will say this right here. I think one of our most important things are getting people out to vote. Okay, we got to get
Ten
communities out to
four.
vote. We got to get them energized and understand that every election is the most important election. So every election is the most important election.
Yes, sir.
And so we got to get people out to vote. That's what's going to make the change. It's going to be up to the American people to make the change, no matter who's in the White House, no matter who's making the decision right now. It's
That's
going to be
right.
up to the American people. It's about where we want as a nation, as American people, what we want to look like now and in the future.
One of the questions I was going to ask you is what gives you hope, but I'm going to tell you right now, you've given me a lot of hope, because I feel like right now I think we're a country that is hurting, and you've been so optimistic and have such a vision for what could bring us together. And I just want to
I
thank you
think
for
both,
that.
yes, you're welcome.
So a couple last things. One is, what's the best way for anyone who wants to get involved with any of your initiatives? A good way for people to connect?
Thank you very much for that. We are active in our community. We meet every once a month, like third Tuesday at one to two libraries. It can be at the Kenton County Library one, and at the Campbell County Library one. We try to mix it up. Since we're in Northern Kentucky, we try to get a meet throughout the region. Because we just don't want to meet in Covington because some of the folks may not travel from Boone. May not travel from Campbell. So we want to be make sure we individuals we accessible to our community. Now, NAACP has been a multiracial organization since its founding in 1909, and so we have always welcomed different racial and ethnic groups, all kind of people in our organization, which we represent. And we try to we represent the interests of everyone. And so, they can call us at 859-442-7476 or send us an email at NKY Branch NAACP at AOL.com, and then we respond to them with our meeting notices and things like that. And we want our region to be for everybody because we got a very prosperous region here. We got regional leaders here with bold visions, and we don't want anybody to be left behind.
Right. Right.
And you have the gala coming up,
Yes,
right?
good. We have the Freedom Fund Gala. We do it once a year, and we have that coming up on November the 7th, and that's going to be at the Madison Event Center. That's just one event we get together and we recognize business, corporations, individuals who have contributed to improving communities, improving our region. So that's a great opportunity to connect and network with individuals. Also, we try to go to many different groups' events as well. Try to be a reciprocal partner in those challenges. And one thing I'll say is over the years, the NAACP, we've had some challenges with some of our community partners in the initial stage, but based on that challenge, our relationship has maintained for over 15 years. So you can go in and have a challenging conversation and you can come out with something. We try to stay at the table until we both can come out with something constructive. Because we believe we go into a meeting with something to offer that's beneficial to our region. We can help craft a conversation or craft a mission where we can work together.
And with the Kenton Dems, we're going to sponsor 2 tables there. So we will see you at the Freedom from Gala for sure.
I'm glad to hear that.
And then we do like to do one final thing with all of our guests. If you're up for it, a little lightning round question, 5 quick questions to get to know you better. If you're up for that.
Yes. Good.
Yes. All right, let's do it. All right, let's start with, what is your favorite comfort food?
That's a good question. That's a good question. Well, I like Asian food, so that's very comforting to me. Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Yeah, when I don't feel good, I love to get some fried
Right,
rice and wonton soup. So I'm with you on that. All right. Okay. What is one song you like to listen to get you fired up for a big event?
Ain't no stopping us now. That's just one song. Ain't no stopping us now. We on the move.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
Yeah, right there.
Now, if you had a time machine, would you go to the past or to the future?
Well, I would just say I'm a technocrat, so I will go toward the future. I always look for the future.
I want to know who your childhood hero was.
Oh, the childhood hero, man. That's a good question there. Well, I had we had a lot of teachers in our communities that taught us. The educators at our elementary school that my mom sent us to gave us a great foundation. They gave us a great foundation and they challenged us. Now my mom had 10 children. Okay, she had 3 triplets. I'm not one of the triplets, but we had 3 triplets. Then most of all of us, about 8 of us, went to college and graduated.
Wow, that is fantastic.
Yeah, we all became leaders in our realms of society. But she had us, with a strong educational foundation, and then our educators there empowered us.
That sounds like your mom's a hero to me, as well. And your last and final lightning round question, Mr. Bowles, is, are you an early bird or a night owl?
I try to be an early bird as much as possible because you got to rise up early. You have to be an early bird to move because all the decisions are mostly made that early, and you don't want to miss out on anything.
Yeah.
And one of the last things I say is dealing with this recent challenge with charliekirk. We have to ask ourselves, what did we miss out on last week because this occurred? We missed out on a whole lot of movement in our nation that that could have propelled us to a whole new level. Some things we should have been in
Yeah.
tune to. We had directed our attention toward that, that unfortunate situation there. And but there's a whole lot of other issues there nationally that we probably missed out on and have to revisit. Because the attention was directed toward that horrific situation, and rightfully so. But we still have a lot of other issues there in our nation that we have to have a awareness of it about what we potentially missed.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good point. That's a good point. You can't get
Well,
distracted. We can mourn and we can grieve, but at the same time, we still have to keep looking forward and moving forward and being
mhm,
aware. That's
Yeah.
absolutely
yes.
correct. Well, I sure appreciate you joining us. It was a very interesting conversation. I learned a lot, and definitely looking forward to engage with the NAACP in Northern Kentucky in the
Mhm.
future.
Thank you all very much. Have a good evening.
And as you know, we always like to leave you with a call to action. And each month, Democrats in every county have been knocking on doors for monthly deep canvassing sessions where we're reaching out to our communities to do nothing other than listen to what people are feeling and what concerns them and what they want from their Democratic leaders. So, thus far in Kenton County, we've knocked on over 150 doors, and we have another day of action set for September 27th from 10 a.m. to noon in the Austinburg neighborhood of Covington. So we invite you to join us for a supremely important grassroots initiative to connect with our communities. And we always like to have a little fun as well. So we'll be having another happy
Yeah.
hour on September 18th at Braxton's Brewery in Fort Mitchell. So come out and join us for a little fun. Have a beer, have a Coke. Brian, what do you got up your sleeve this month?
Well, as we mentioned way back in our last pod, we took our little Labor Day break there, which was nice. But on Labor Day, there were the Workers Over Billionaires protests across the country. Actually, I was a little disappointed that there was not a rally in downtown Cincinnati, but I think if everyone remembers, there was some unrest that had occurred just a week or so previously, and I think the city leaders and protest organizers were afraid there might be some repercussions if a demonstration followed too closely behind that incident. There wasn't one downtown, but there were rallies in Mason, Ohio, and Claremont County. And I went out to the one at Claremont County, was out on Clough Pike, and
Right?
I think it was like Pioneer Park or something like that. And really just joined in some good old sign waving for a couple of hours. There were maybe 150 people or so strung along the roadway at its peak. So it was a little disappointing, but we got a ton of horn honks, waves, thumbs up, and also a few expletives thrown our ways that we won't share here. But actually, secretly, that's part of what makes it really fun.
Yeah.
So really, October 18th is the next big day, and I think this one is going to not disappoint. Is essentially a part two of the No Kings Day, which was in April and had 5 to 6 million people across, I think, over 1,600 organized protests. So this one's promising to be really big with millions of people supposedly going to hit the streets. I did a quick search before the pod on the progress of the organizing. I'm seeing lots of events in Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana, and we'll continue to keep an eye on this and keep everybody posted as the No Kings protest day on October 18th gets closer. The main issues that are going to be focused on are Trump's unlawful redistricting coup, which
Yep.
we haven't spoken a whole lot about, but that's a fun one. You know,
A
let's
whole nother
steal the
episode.
election in 2026. Let's go.
Right?
First in Texas and now Missouri, they're underway. The second is ICE overreach and unlawful tactics. Lots of horrifying grassroots video clips of some of the stuff that's happening out there. And of course, the Epstein files, that's my favorite. I'm sure if there is a government shutdown, that will also get a lot of attention as well during that time. And then finally, quickly, I just wanted to say that I think the current environment, what I'm kind of seeing is incenting people just to take to the streets spontaneously to protest whatever local atrocity has been committed by the lawless Trump administration. There are so many on a daily, if not hourly basis. You could really stay on the street corner 24/7 and just swap out your signs to reflect the most egregious act. So just keep fighting, everyone. If you don't think pushback is effective, just look at Chicago. Trump promised a military takeover, and it has not materialized because the political leaders and the people fought back. This is how we win.
This is absolutely how we win. And I was just in New Mexico last week and in Colorado, and it was great. A little town of Santa Fe and Taos, as I drove by on two separate occasions, there were people lining the streets with their
Right.
signs. Yeah.
People are just getting out, and they're mad, and they're just getting together. And, it is effective. It makes a difference. So don't think it doesn't.
Absolutely. And on that high note,
Yeah.
we'll conclude it for the podcast. Thank you all for joining us. We surely appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll be back in 2 weeks to bring you up to speed with all things political in Kenton County and beyond.
Yes, and as always, don't forget you can join the conversation at our Facebook and Instagram pages or at bluedotpodcast.com. And if you like listening to our podcast, consider donating to help fund it, which you can do by clicking on the donate link at bluedotpodcast.com. And as always, until next time, stay curious, keep the facts in focus, and never stop fighting for what matters. Peace out, everyone.